Robert, thanks you for the time. I think let's begin with the overall African picture. And it's not a happy one, is it? I mean, you are reporting 17 of the 34 sub-Saharan African economies in this year's index are in the bottom 20 ranked countries. I mean, what happened?
Good morning, first of all. Yes, first of all, we'd like to highlight the fact that we launched a new competitiveness index this year. Only 34 indicators out of the 98 that we use are used also for the previous methodology that we used in the past. But even with the new methodology, most of African economies rank towards the bottom. And here is, of course, a mix between some of the long-standing issues, such as, for example, infrastructure delays and institutional development, as well as new factors, such as new ways to measure ICT adoption, new skills, and some aspects of innovation where Africa lags behind.
So when you look at the difference between the new methodology and the old methodology, is there a big difference between where the countries would have been if you had stuck with your old methodology versus where they are now with the new methodology?
We tend to discourage this kind of comparison exactly because the methodology measures different things with different ways. However, what we did was comparing this year methodology with the same methodology using last year data. And here we see that also there is a bit of a drop of many African economies on different factors. Of course, each economy has its own strengths and weaknesses. It's a bit difficult to say what is in common. One aspect maybe that can be highlighted is the fact that given that many African economies are driven by external demand and commodity prices, and since those prices have not been as high as 2015, we have seen deterioration of macroeconomic position in all the economies which are highly dependent on exports, especially on raw materials.
Absolutely. And looking at that overall African picture, Mauritius remained the best ranked African country at 49th. And then right at the bottom, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. You are looking at Nigeria 115th. And Chad is number 140, which is the other damning news coming out of the African continent. Overall, when you look at where we are as African countries, do you get a sense of regression or progression?
We have seen not much progress. So most of African economies have remained more or less at the same level. Given that if we look at the change in the ranks, sometimes there is a difference just because we have less economies ranked vis-a-vis last year. So sometimes the rank can be misleading. But if you look at the performance, we've seen that the performance is more or less stable with what we would expect is some faster progression on some dimension where we have seen, at least on the ground, anecdotal evidence of leapfrogging, especially when it comes to ICT adoption. There we see that we would expect much more access to internet, but still only less than half of the population of Africa has access to internet today.
Yeah. Absolutely. What's wrong with South Africa and Nigeria? I mean, these are two of Africa's biggest economies. I mean, South Africa is 67, and I'm looking at Nigeria is 115th. I mean, we're never going to improve as a continent when our lead economies are in bad shape like that, are we?
Certainly, we would expect more from the economies which are G20 economies or the leading economies, both in terms of innovation or market size. They're certainly the countries where all the continent look at to find solutions and policy suggestions. When it comes to South Africa, it's a bit of a mix between some of the factors which are relates more to a developing economy, such as, for example, if you look at the health conditions of the population or some aspect of governance. There's where South Africa lags behind. Also, when it looks at the skills, There is some aspects of the skills which are not up to a fourth industrial revolution type of economy, especially digital skills or the quality of the skills taught in schools. There's where it would be possible to have a faster improvement. On the other hand, South Africa has some very strong drivers of competitiveness. For example, is one of the best best financial system in the world, ranking 18th overall, and of course the leader in South Africa. We already discussed about market size.
Yeah.
And with respect to South Africa, there is also good performance in terms of innovation.
Sure, which is great.
Similarly,
yeah. Go on.
Also, when we look at Nigeria, as we were asking about Nigeria, there is a lot of elements to discuss with respect to that economy. Mm-hmm. There also we see a bit of a mixed picture, because some of the aspects which are more advanced to some extent, for example, entrepreneurship is very well developed in Nigeria, and also if we look at the market, the labor market functioning, it works quite well. Mm-hmm. However, there are still some of the long-standing issues, such as some aspect of the banking sector, mm-hmm. which is not as stable as one would expect. The effects of the macroeconomic stability is also something that Nigeria needs to fix. Inflation is still in double digit, for example.
Yeah.
And also some of more structural factors, such as infrastructure and governance.
Yeah. On South Africa, one of the things that really surprised me was the ranking of 128 on starting a business. Absolutely shocking. What are the problems there?
This is what we consider one of the administrative factors that can stifle a bit the entrepreneurship of a nation. Because, of course, there's some aspects which refer purely to the private sector, so how much people are willing to start a business and if there are conditions there to start a business, but also the administrative aspects, such as purely bureaucratic aspect of how long it takes to administratively start a business. So in the case of South Africa, it takes 45 days from the moment a company wants to start a business till the moment when you can actually have the business registered.
Absolutely. We shall certainly be chasing this one with the South African Investment Center as well as the Department of Trade and Industry. Thank you for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you very much.
Robert Crotti, his lead researcher on this year's World Competitiveness Report from the World Economic Forum.